Let me hit you with a question that's been eating me alive. When you break up with someone, isn't it supposed to be over? Done. Final. So why the hell do so many people keep the back door unlocked for their ex? Texting, calling, meeting up as friends. I used to think that was just weak boundaries, but I found out the hard way it can destroy everything you've built. My name's Red, and I thought I was about to marry the love of my life, Emily. We had the ring, the house, the future mapped out. But one phone call changed it all. In the next hour, I'm going to walk you through exactly how I went from fiancé to broken man in a single sentence. And when you hear it, you'll never look at your relationship the same way again. Before Emily and I ever crossed that line into love, she was stuck in something dark with a man named Mark. From the outside, he looked like the guy who had it all together. But behind closed doors, it was chaos. One minute he was charming, the next he was screaming so loud the neighbors would turn up their TVs. Emily told me how she lived like she was walking on eggshells, never knowing if a simple question would spark an argument or a cold silence that lasted for days. And sometimes, it got worse than yelling. You could see it in her eyes, that hollow look of someone trying to survive the person they slept next to. I wasn't her hero. I didn't jump in to rescue her. I knew she had to find her own way out. But as I watched her sink deeper into that storm, one thought kept haunting me. How much more could she take before she finally broke? I knew what was happening between Emily and Mark. I saw the bruises that weren't always physical, the way her shoulders tightened when her phone lit up with his name, the way her laugh sounded forced when he stood beside her. Every instinct in me screamed to step in, to tell her she deserved better, to drag her out of that apartment and never let her look back. But I held myself back. Because here's the truth. You can't save someone who isn't ready to be saved. If I had tried, it would have pushed her further into his grip. So instead, I became a quiet witness. I stayed in the background, hoping she'd realize it on her own. And every night I wondered, how long can a person survive like that before the breaking point finally comes? Because deep down, I knew it was coming. The only question was when, and what would be left of her when it happened. There were nights when Emily would show up at my place without a word. No makeup, hair tangled, eyes red from crying. She'd sit on my couch, silent, staring at the floor like she was afraid if she spoke, she'd shatter completely. Sometimes she'd try to hide it, force a smile, crack a joke, but you can't fake the kind of exhaustion that seeps into your bones. I remember one night she broke down in my kitchen. She dropped a glass, and as it shattered, so did she. She slid to the floor, covering her face, whispering, "I can't do this anymore." I wanted to pick her up, to tell her it was over, that she never had to go back. But I knew tomorrow she'd still return to him. Every breakdown ended the same way. She pulled herself together, wiped her tears, and walked back into the storm. And I couldn't stop asking myself, how many more times could she survive that before she didn't come back at all? Leaving someone like Mark doesn't happen in one dramatic explosion. It happens in fragments, in little choices no one else notices. I saw it begin when Emily stopped answering his calls the second they came in. She'd let the phone buzz, her jaw tight, her eyes fixed anywhere but that screen. Then she stopped defending him in conversations. Where she once made excuses, he's just stressed, he didn't mean it, she started going quiet, almost ashamed. Eventually, she began spending more nights away from their apartment, crashing at a friend's place, sometimes even on my couch. Each time she carried more of herself with her, an extra bag, a few clothes, a box of books. It was like watching someone slowly smuggle their soul out of prison. And the more she tasted freedom, the more obvious it became. She wasn't going back forever. The only question left was how she'd finally cut the cord, and what kind of wreckage Mark would leave behind when she did. The night it finally happened, Emily called me out of nowhere. Her voice was shaking, almost broken. She said, "I can't do this anymore. Can I come over?" Minutes later, she was at my door, eyes swollen, hands trembling. She told me Mark had exploded again, screaming, throwing things, blaming her for everything wrong in his life. And this time, something inside her just snapped. "I told him I was done," she whispered, like she couldn't believe she'd actually said the words. She described how he stared at her, cold, silent, like he couldn't process it. Then came the rage, accusations, threats, begging. But for the first time, she didn't bend. She grabbed her keys, walked out, and didn't look back. When she finished telling me, she collapsed into my arms, sobbing like she'd been holding her breath for years. I held her, but in the back of my mind I wondered, was this really the end? Or just another cycle waiting to start again? You'd think walking away would feel like victory, but for Emily, freedom felt like stepping into a void. The first few days after she left Mark, she drifted like a ghost. She'd sit on my porch for hours, wrapped in a blanket even when the sun was out, staring at nothing. Her phone would buzz with his messages, apologies, threats, promises, and she'd flinch at every vibration, like the leash was still there even though she'd cut it. At night, she'd jolt awake from nightmares, whispering, "He's here. I can hear him." And I'd have to remind her, again and again, "No, he's gone. He can't hurt you anymore." But I could see how empty she felt. She wasn't celebrating a fresh start. She was mourning the years she lost, the pieces of herself she'd given away. And as much as I wanted to tell her it would get better, a question gnawed at me. How do you rebuild someone who doesn't remember who they were before they broke? In those first fragile weeks, I learned the power of silence. I didn't try to lecture Emily, didn't bombard her with advice, didn't tell her how to heal. I just showed up. I'd sit with her on the porch, 2 mugs of coffee between us, watching the neighborhood go by. Some days she wanted to talk, her words spilling out in a flood of anger and grief. Other days she said nothing at all, just stared into space while the world kept moving. Either way, I stayed. I'd bring her groceries, fix the leaky faucet in her kitchen, walk her dog when she didn't have the energy. Small things, nothing heroic. Because she didn't need a savior. She needed someone steady, someone who wouldn't leave when things got uncomfortable. And as the days passed, I noticed something shifting in her eyes. For the first time in years, there was a flicker of trust. A flicker pointed right at me. It didn't happen overnight. There wasn't some big declaration or a sudden spark. It was quieter than that, like the slow warmth of a sunrise. One evening we cooked dinner together, something simple, pasta and garlic bread. She laughed when I burned the toast, really laughed, not the forced smile I'd seen before. That laugh stuck with me. It felt like proof she was still in there somewhere, fighting to come back. Another time we walked around the block, no destination, just moving side by side. She slipped her hand through my arm without thinking, and neither of us pulled away. It was small, ordinary, but it felt monumental. Those moments kept adding up. Inside jokes, shared playlists, late-night conversations that stretched until dawn. The kind of closeness that doesn't demand, it just happens. And the more it happened, the harder it became to ignore the question lingering in both our minds. Was this still just friendship? Or was it becoming something else? It wasn't planned, not really. One Friday night she asked if I wanted to grab dinner, just the 2 of us. We'd eaten together 100 times before, but that night felt different. She wore a dress I'd never seen, simple but elegant, and when she stepped out of her car, my breath caught in my throat. The restaurant wasn't fancy, just a small diner with vinyl booths and neon lights buzzing overhead. But the way she looked at me across the table made it feel like the most important place in the world. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing, and for the first time I caught myself staring at her, not as a friend, but as something more. When we left, she lingered by her car. I walked her to the door, heart racing, and before I could second-guess it, she leaned in. A soft kiss, brief but undeniable. In that instant I knew everything had just changed. The day after that kiss, everything felt different. The air between us carried a new weight, sweet but uncertain. Part of me wondered if she regretted it, if she'd retreat back into the safety of friendship. But when I stopped by her place with coffee the next morning, she smiled in a way that answered the question before I could ask. We sat on her couch, both nervous, both pretending we weren't. Finally, I broke the silence. "Emily, are we still just friends?" She looked at me, eyes steady, and whispered, "Do you want us to be?" My heart pounded. I told her the truth, that I wanted more, that I'd wanted it for longer than I cared to admit. She didn't hesitate. She took my hand, laced her fingers through mine, and said, "Then let's stop pretending." That was it. In that moment, we weren't just 2 survivors leaning on each other. We were something real. something new. Those first months with Emily felt like stepping into sunlight after years of rain. Everything was brighter, lighter, alive. We'd spend whole weekends together, lazy mornings making pancakes, afternoons driving with no destination, nights falling asleep on the couch with the TV still on. I remember one evening at the park. She ran ahead on the trail, spinning around with her arms wide open, laughing like a kid who'd just been given her freedom back. I'd never seen her so alive, and I thought, this is what healing looks like. Friends started noticing, too, how her eyes lit up again, how my smile came easier. It felt like we'd found a rhythm that was ours alone, simple and safe. I didn't think about Mark or her past, or even the possibility of cracks forming again. For the first time, I let myself believe in forever. But deep down, some part of me wondered, could forever really be this easy? If the first months were all about excitement, the next were about trust. Emily and I made a promise early on, no half-truths, no secrets. After what she'd been through, honesty wasn't optional, it was survival. We shared everything, even the ugly parts. She told me about her fears of repeating the past, how she sometimes panicked when she saw Mark's name pop up on old mail or social media. I told her about my own flaws, my stubbornness, my tendency to shut down when I felt hurt. Instead of running from those truths, we leaned into them. We set boundaries together, clear lines we wouldn't cross, and for the first time, she said she felt safe. I felt it too. Nights lying side by side, talking until we drifted to sleep, I believed we were building something solid, something unshakable. And yet looking back, I can't help but wonder, did that foundation have cracks we chose not to see? Every couple has that one memory, the kind you hold on to when the world feels shaky. Ours came on a road trip we decided to take one weekend, no plan, just gas in the tank and open highways. We ended up at this tiny lakeside town, the kind of place where time feels slower. That night we sat on the dock with our feet in the water, a cheap bottle of wine between us, watching the reflection of the moon ripple across the surface. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "I can't remember the last time I felt this at peace." I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. I just wrapped my arm around her and knew in that moment she wasn't looking back. For once, her past felt miles away. But the truth about memories is they become anchors, and sometimes anchors don't always keep you safe. Sometimes they weigh you down. In the months that followed, I watched Emily transform. The woman who once flinched at every phone buzz now laughed when her friends texted her at midnight. She started painting again, something she'd given up years before. She'd hum while cooking, dance barefoot in the kitchen, take long drives with the windows down just to feel the wind in her hair. Little by little, she was reclaiming herself, the version of Emily she thought Mark had destroyed. And I'll admit, I felt proud that our love could be the safe place where she could rebuild. She told me once while we were walking through a farmer's market, "You've given me my life back." I smiled, but deep down I knew I hadn't given her anything. She had fought for it herself. Still, seeing her shine again made me believe we were unstoppable. But the thing about change is, it doesn't always stop where you hope it will. When you've been through the fire with someone, commitment feels less like a question and more like the only answer. One evening, after dinner at her place, we were sitting on the couch talking about the future, kids, houses, even the kind of dog we wanted someday. The words slipped out before I could stop them. Then why don't we just do it? Let's get married. For a second she froze, wide-eyed, and I worried I'd pushed too far. But then she smiled, tears filling her eyes, and whispered, "Yes, absolutely, yes." We didn't make a big production of it, no staged proposal or ring in a champagne glass. It was raw, simple, just us deciding we were all in. I slipped a modest ring on her finger a week later, and we celebrated with takeout Chinese and cheap champagne. That night I thought, this is it. I've found my forever. What I didn't realize was, forever can change in an instant. When we announced our engagement, the reactions came in waves. Emily's parents were relieved more than anything. They'd seen what she'd endured with Mark and told me, quietly but firmly, "Thank you for giving our daughter back to us." Her closest friends hugged her like she'd climbed out of a burning building and finally made it to safety. My family was thrilled too, though my brother pulled me aside at the celebration and asked, half joking, "You sure you're ready for this?" I laughed it off, but the question lingered in my head longer than I expected. Still, the overwhelming feeling was joy. People toasted, raised glasses, told us we deserved every bit of happiness coming our way. It felt like a clean slate, like everyone around us believed we'd beaten the odds. And in that glow of approval, we started making plans, real, concrete ones. The first big step, finding a home that would be ours. That decision changed everything. Every couple dreams of their first home, and for us, it was a little two-bedroom in the suburbs just outside Chicago. White siding, a patch of grass in the front, a maple tree that would blaze red in the fall. It wasn't fancy, but it felt like ours. I still remember the day we signed the papers. Emily squeezed my hand so tight, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. We talked about paint colors, where the couch would go, how we'd host friends for summer barbecues. For me, it wasn't just a house. It was proof. Proof that we were building something lasting, that the chaos of her past was behind us. The neighbors waved when we moved in, welcoming us like we belonged. And for those first weeks, unpacking boxes side by side, laughing over takeout on the floor, I believed it too. What I didn't see then was how a house can hold secrets just as easily as love. Those first months in our new house felt like the start of everything we'd ever wanted. We unpacked boxes slowly, turning the empty rooms into something warm, something ours. We'd cook meals together in the half-finished kitchen, laughing when we burned the chicken or spilled wine on the carpet we swore we'd keep spotless. Evenings were our favorite, curled up on the couch, binge-watching shows until one of us fell asleep mid-episode. On weekends, we'd take long walks around the block, hand in hand, waving to neighbors, talking about the future as if it was guaranteed. There was a rhythm to it, simple and steady, like the hum of a song you never get tired of hearing. I remember thinking, if this is what marriage feels like, then I'm ready. But here's the thing about rhythms, they can be disrupted. And sometimes, the first wrong note is so faint, you don't even hear it until the whole song starts to fall apart. It's funny how quickly a house becomes a home when routines take root. Weeknights were our little traditions, cooking dinner together, usually something simple, grilled chicken, pasta, takeout on the lazy days. Afterward, we'd curl up on the couch, arguing about what to watch, then staying up too late binging shows until our eyes could barely stay open. On weekends, we'd walk around the block, hand in hand, waving to neighbors mowing lawns or kids riding bikes. Sometimes we'd talk about our future, where we wanted to travel, how many kids we'd have, what color to paint the guest room. Other times, we just walked in comfortable silence, enjoying the sound of our footsteps side by side. It all felt so ordinary, so safe, like we had finally outrun the storms of her past. But ordinary has a way of hiding cracks beneath the surface, and I didn't realize that soon the smallest fracture would change everything. There was a night, not long after we'd settled in, when I looked at Emily across the dinner table and thought, this is it. No doubt, no hesitation, just certainty. The clink of our forks, the hum of the TV in the background, her smile when she caught me staring. It all felt permanent, like we had finally arrived at the life we'd been chasing. I imagined anniversaries in that house, kids' drawings taped to the fridge, gray hair and quiet mornings on the porch swing. It wasn't a dream anymore. It was real, here, now. And for the first time, I allowed myself to relax, to stop looking over my shoulder for shadows of her past. I believed we were untouchable, that love had carried us through the worst and planted us on solid ground. But forever is a dangerous word, because the moment you start believing it's guaranteed, that's when life tests how strong forever really is. The first crack didn't come with shouting or slammed doors. It came on an ordinary evening, the kind you'd forget if not for what followed. I'd misplaced my phone. Nothing dramatic, just one of those small annoyances. I checked the kitchen, the couch cushions, under the bed. Nowhere. Finally, I grabbed Emily's phone to call mine, planning to make it ring. It was a harmless move, something we'd both done before without a second thought. But that night, that small, ordinary decision set everything else in motion. Because when I unlocked her screen and scrolled to the call log, ready to dial my own number, something stopped me cold. A name I never expected to see was sitting there, plain as day. In that single second, my stomach dropped, my pulse spiked, and I knew our forever wasn't as solid as I believed. The name, Mark, and seeing it there felt like being punched by a ghost. I remember telling myself it was nothing. Just grab her phone, hit call, and find mine wedged under a cushion somewhere. That's all it was supposed to be, an innocent favor to myself. But the second her screen lit up in my hand, I hesitated. My thumb hovered over the dial button, and that's when I saw it. Mark. Not buried deep in old contacts, not some forgotten name collecting digital dust. No, his name was right there, sitting in her recent calls, bold as daylight. My chest tightened as if the walls around me had shrunk. I stared at it, hoping my eyes were playing tricks. Maybe it was an old number, maybe it was just a glitch. But the timestamp told the truth. It wasn't weeks ago. It was days. In that moment, I felt like I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. And the worst part? Some voice inside me whispered, "You're about to find out more than you want to know." There it was, clear as day. Mark's name, stamped into her call history like a wound that wouldn't close. Not once, not twice, several times, each one recent, each one undeniable. My throat went dry. I told myself there had to be an explanation, some innocent reason. Maybe she'd misdialed. Maybe he'd reached out about something practical, an old bill, a mutual friend, some unfinished business. But deep down, I knew better. After everything she'd said about him, after every tear she shed swearing she was done, seeing his name lit up on her screen felt like betrayal carved into glass. I stared at those entries until the numbers blurred, my heart pounding in my ears. It wasn't just a ghost from her past. It was proof he was still in her present. And suddenly the question hit me like a hammer. If she promised me forever, why was she still answering his calls? The moment I saw Mark's name, my whole body went cold. It was like the floor shifted under me, like gravity itself had turned against me. My hands trembled so badly I almost dropped her phone. I couldn't breathe right. Each inhale caught in my chest like a stone. 1,000 questions raced through my mind at once. Why him? Why now? Was I blind this whole time? Part of me wanted to believe it was nothing, that it was some fluke. But the dates and times were staring back at me like open wounds, undeniable. My heart hammered so loud I was sure she could hear it from the other room. I sat there frozen, caught between wanting to throw the phone across the room and wanting to dig deeper. And that's when the ugliest thought surfaced. If I open those messages, my life may never look the same again. But could I really put it down without knowing? My thumb hovered over the screen for what felt like forever. Part of me prayed the messages would prove me wrong, that I'd find a simple, harmless conversation I could dismiss as nothing. But the second I opened them, my heart sank. There they were, long threads of back-and-forth texts, not the casual one-off I'd hoped for. They joked, shared updates, even slipped into nostalgia about old times. She wrote things like, "I'm glad you reached out and it's nice talking again." He asked about her life, her feelings, whether she ever thought about the past, and she answered. Every word cut deeper, not because they were overtly romantic, but because they existed at all. After everything she'd told me about him, after all the pain he caused, why would she let him back in? My chest burned with betrayal, but underneath the anger was something worse, fear. Fear that maybe, just maybe, she still needed him in ways I could never replace. I couldn't sit with it any longer. Phone still in my hand, I walked into the bedroom where Emily was lying down, scrolling like it was just another night. My voice came out sharper than I intended. "Why are you still talking to him?" She froze, eyes wide, like I'd just spoken a foreign language. For a second, she didn't say anything, and that silence screamed louder than any words. Finally, she stammered, "It's nothing, just casual. He checked in, that's all." My chest tightened. Casual? After everything she'd told me about him? I reminded her of the night she cried, of the promises she made, of how she swore he was her past. She looked guilty but defiant, like she wanted to believe her own excuse. I told her straight. It crossed a line. She sat up, chewing her lip, then finally whispered, "If it makes you feel better, I'll cut him off." Relief flickered, but doubt was already coiled inside me. She reached for my hand, her eyes wide and wet. "I'll end it," she said. "I don't want this to come between us." Her voice was soft, almost pleading, like she knew exactly what I needed to hear. And in that moment, I wanted so badly to believe her. To believe that this was just a brief lapse, a mistake she'd never repeat. She promised she'd delete his number, block him if that's what I wanted, and I nodded, trying to let the relief settle in. For a while it worked. My heartbeat slowed, my anger cooled, and I told myself maybe I'd overreacted. Maybe love really could survive a small crack without the whole thing collapsing. She leaned against me, whispering, "You're the only one I want." I wrapped my arms around her, but somewhere deep inside a question lingered like smoke after a fire. Was this truly the end, or just the calm before another storm? I told myself trust meant giving her another chance, so I chose to believe her. I tucked the phone back into her hands, kissed her forehead, and said, "Okay, let's move on." And for the first time that night, she smiled with relief, like a prisoner hearing the cell door unlock. I wanted that smile to mean she was free, that we were free. I kept replaying her words in my head. "You're the only one I want," using them like a bandage to cover the wound in my chest. Friends always say relationships can't survive without trust, and I clung to that idea, convincing myself I'd done the right thing by letting it go. But deep down, the doubt didn't vanish. It sat there quietly, waiting, like a hairline crack in glass that no one notices until the pressure builds. For now, though, I forced myself to breathe, to believe, and for a short while, it almost worked. For a little while, life slipped back into place. We cooked dinners without tension hanging over us. We laughed at dumb TV shows, fell asleep tangled together, and for those few days it almost felt like nothing had happened. I told myself this was what forgiveness looked like, that maybe we'd stumbled but found our footing again. I even caught myself feeling hopeful, imagining our wedding plans, the house warming with friends, the future back on track. Emily seemed lighter too, more affectionate, as if my decision to trust her had lifted a weight off her shoulders. And I wanted to believe that smile, that touch, that calm. But sometimes peace feels too perfect, too fragile, like a glass table that could shatter with the smallest knock. I didn't know it yet, but the storm wasn't gone. It was only gathering strength, waiting for the right moment to strike again. It didn't take long for me to feel it, the shift. On the surface, things looked normal. Dinners together, Netflix at night, weekend walks. But underneath, something had changed. The laughter didn't ring as freely. The silences stretched a little too long, and I caught her staring at the floor more than at me. When I touched her shoulder, sometimes she tensed before relaxing, like her body wasn't sure if it wanted comfort or distance. I tried to tell myself it was stress, leftover trauma, anything but what I feared. But once you've seen the crack in the glass, you can't unsee it. Even when it looks intact, you know pressure is building. Every smile felt rehearsed. Every "I love you" carried a weight it hadn't before. And though I wanted to believe we'd sealed the fracture, a part of me knew better. The energy was different now, like a storm rumbling far off, invisible but impossible to ignore. That's when I noticed the change. Emily had always been casual with her phone. She'd leave it charging in the kitchen, forget it in the car, sometimes even hand it to me if she was busy. But suddenly, it never left her side. She took it to the bathroom, kept it in her pocket while folding laundry, clutched it like it was an extension of her body. At first, I brushed it off. Everyone's glued to their phones these days, right? But this was different. If I so much as glanced toward it, she'd shift it out of sight. Once, while we were watching a movie, her screen lit up. She snatched it so fast you'd think it was a live grenade. My stomach twisted, but I didn't say anything. I just sat there, pretending to focus on the film while my mind screamed the truth I didn't want to face. Something was happening again, and I was about to find out how deep it went. The phone was only the beginning. Soon, other changes crept in, small at first, but impossible to ignore once I saw the pattern. Emily used to be carefree about her evenings, happy to cook, to talk, to watch shows together. But now she'd slip away for long showers, emerge with damp hair and a distant look, like her mind had been somewhere else. She laughed less, smiled less, and when she did, it felt rehearsed. She'd step outside to get some air, but always with that phone in hand. Sometimes she'd come back inside with a strange heaviness, eyes avoiding mine, her words clipped short. Even her sleep changed, restless, tossing, turning, clutching the blanket like she was hiding from a truth I wasn't supposed to see. I tried to brush it off, tell myself it was just stress, just leftover scars from her past. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew better. Something was unraveling, and I couldn't stop it. I told myself not to overthink it. Everyone goes through phases, right? Maybe she was just stressed from work. Maybe she needed space. Maybe I was projecting old fears onto her. I repeated those excuses like mantras, convincing myself that love meant trust, and trust meant letting things slide. I wanted so badly to keep the peace that I swallowed the doubts clawing at me. When she pulled away, I told myself she was just tired. When she smiled less, I blamed it on the weather. When she clutched her phone, I pretended it didn't matter. At night, lying awake beside her, I whispered inside my head, "She chose me. She promised me. That has to be enough." But the truth is, reassurance built on denial is fragile. Deep down, I felt the cracks widening, the silence between us growing heavier. And no matter how hard I tried to bury it, the unease always followed me into the dark. Sleep became a stranger. I'd lie awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying moments from the day, analyzing every glance, every word, every movement. The laughter we used to share felt hollow in my mind, like echoes of something that no longer existed. My heart raced at the slightest sound, the door closing, the phone vibrating, a knock outside. During the day, I found myself distracted, unable to focus at work, thinking about what she might be doing when I wasn't around. I tried to tell myself it was all in my head, that I was letting suspicion poison what we'd built. But the unease wouldn't go away. Each night, I'd roll over, glance at her sleeping profile, and a tiny voice whispered, "Something's wrong. Pay attention." I didn't want to hear it, but deep down, I knew ignoring it would only make the fallout worse. I couldn't carry it alone anymore. The sleepless nights, the gnawing unease. I needed someone to tell me if I was losing my mind or if my instincts were right. I called my closest friend, someone who knew both of us well. I recounted everything, the phone, the distant glances, the sudden secrecy. I waited for him to tell me I was overreacting, to reassure me that love sometimes had odd quirks. But he didn't. Instead, he said gently, "Red, trust your gut. You know her better than anyone. If something feels off, it probably is." His words hit me like a punch I didn't see coming. I sat there, heart racing, realizing that my gut hadn't been wrong. It had been screaming for weeks. I left that conversation knowing what I had to do next. The next step wasn't about hoping or guessing. It was about finding the truth, no matter how uncomfortable. After hanging up with my friend, the decision became clear. I had to know the truth. I couldn't keep living with this gnawing doubt eating at me from the inside. I told myself it wasn't about mistrust. It was about clarity. I needed to see, with my own eyes, what was really going on. That afternoon, I made a plan. I'd stop by the house on my lunch break, unannounced, just to grab a hard drive I'd forgotten at home. Normally, I'd call ahead, let her know I was coming. But today, I didn't. Today, I needed to see everything as it was, without warning, without preparation. My hands shook slightly as I drove, stomach twisted in knots. I told myself it was just a quick stop, but deep down, I knew this moment could change everything, and it did. That morning, I left the house earlier than usual, trying to act casual. A few errands, nothing unusual, at least that's what I told myself. My car hummed along the quiet streets, but inside, my thoughts raced. I ran through every possible scenario. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe it was innocent. Maybe I'd be standing there in a few minutes and nothing would be wrong at all. But the pit in my stomach wouldn't let me believe that. Each red light, each turn felt like a countdown to something I wasn't ready to see. I gripped the steering wheel so tight my knuckles turned white, my mind looping over the conversations, the subtle changes, the strange glances. I was about to walk into the house she shared with me, but today it wasn't about living together, laughing together. It was about uncovering the truth. And that truth had a face I was both dreading and needing to see. I got back to the neighborhood around noon, the sun high and the streets calm. Everything looked normal from the outside. The mailbox still leaned the same way. The maple tree swayed in the breeze. But I felt a storm brewing inside. I parked a few houses down, pretending to scroll through my phone, trying to steady my heartbeat. My hands were sweating. Every instinct screamed that I was about to uncover something I didn't want to see. I stepped out, walking slowly, casually, as if I had no agenda. But every step toward our front door felt heavier, like gravity itself was pushing me back. I kept telling myself it would be fine. It had to be fine. And yet, the small details, the faint sound of a car pulling up, The rhythm of a familiar voice twisted my stomach. Something was happening inside our house, and I was about to witness it. After grabbing the hard drive, I decided on a quick coffee break, my mind still racing with suspicion. A few blocks from the house sat the small cafe I often visited. Familiar, unassuming, a place I thought I knew. I walked in, nodded at the barista, ordered my usual, and turned to find a seat. That's when I saw them. Emily, sitting at a corner table, laughing in that effortless way she hadn't laughed around me for weeks. And beside her, Mark. My stomach dropped. They hadn't noticed me yet, caught up in their conversation. Every detail stabbed at me. The tilt of her head, the ease of his smirk, the casual way her hand rested near his. My breath caught. My mind raced. In that instant, the world fell away, and all I could feel was the betrayal hitting me like a freight train. I froze, unable to move, unable to speak, watching the truth unfold in front of me. I stood frozen at the entrance, my coffee forgotten on the counter, as my eyes fixed on them. Emily and Mark weren't just texting or sitting awkwardly, they were talking like nothing had ever happened, leaning close, sharing smiles, even laughing softly at some inside joke. Every word, every gesture felt like a knife twisting in my chest. My mind screamed for an explanation, but my mouth went dry. The cafe around them blurred into insignificance. All I could see was what I had feared all along. I watched them for what felt like an eternity, heart hammering, stomach knotting tighter with each passing second. Then, instinctively, I stepped closer, each footfall heavier than the last. I wanted to confront them, demand answers, rip the truth out of the air. But at the same time, a part of me dreaded what I would find when I finally spoke. And then it happened. I made my presence known, and the room seemed to freeze. I walked over, coffee in hand, but my focus was elsewhere. There they were, Emily, laughing softly, relaxed in a way she hadn't been around me for weeks. Mark sat across from her, leaning back, smiling like everything was normal. My chest tightened, my jaw locked. I could see the ease between them, the casual familiarity, and it felt like a punch to the gut. For a moment, I didn't breathe, just watched, as if moving might shatter the fragile air around us. Then I realized I couldn't stay hidden any longer. My footsteps carried me forward, each one heavier than the last, until I stood at the edge of their table. Emily looked up, her eyes widening as she finally saw me. Mark froze, sensing the tension. I didn't speak yet. I didn't need to. The weight of betrayal hung in the air, thick enough to choke anyone who dared breathe it in. This was the moment everything changed. I froze in place, coffee still in hand, my heart hammering like it wanted to break through my chest. Emily's eyes met mine, wide, startled, as if she couldn't comprehend why I was there. Mark sat back, a flicker of unease crossing his face, sensing the tension I carried. For a moment, none of us moved, and the bustling cafe felt like it had vanished, leaving only the three of us suspended in a bubble of inevitable confrontation. My mind raced, recalling every promise she had made, every assurance that he was her past. And now, here they were, so close, so casual, defying every word she had told me. Anger surged, sharp and hot, but beneath it, an ache twisted through me, a mix of betrayal, disbelief, and heartbreak. I wanted to shout, to demand answers, to shake reality into place, but I just stood there, the weight of what I had discovered pressing down like a physical force. For a few seconds, I stood there, unseen, invisible, watching them. Emily leaned closer to Mark, laughing at something he said, her hand brushing the table as though he were still a part of her everyday life. My stomach twisted. Each laugh, each gesture, each subtle glance between them felt like a betrayal in slow motion. I wanted to step forward, to confront, but part of me lingered in disbelief. Was this really happening? They hadn't even registered my presence yet. It was as if the world had blurred around us, leaving only their bubble. I counted their movements in my head, memorizing every expression, every word. I wanted proof, undeniable proof, that what I feared was true. And then, almost instinctively, I took a step closer, the floor beneath me solid but my chest tight. The moment I cleared the table's edge, Emily's head shot up, and the confrontation began. My feet moved almost on their own, carrying me toward them, each step heavier than the last. Emily's eyes widened the moment she registered me standing there, coffee still in my hand, my chest tight with anger I could barely contain. Mark leaned back, startled, sensing the tension radiating off me. I didn't say a word at first. I didn't need to. The silence was deafening, a pressure so thick you could cut it with a knife. Every laugh they had shared moments ago felt like an accusation, every casual gesture a slap in the face. I stood there, towering over the small table, and for a heartbeat the world seemed to stop. Emily's smile faltered, uncertainty flashing across her face. Then, slowly, the words formed, raw and sharp. "Don't come home." And in that instant, the truth didn't just hit me, it slammed into me with full force. I said it without thinking, without hesitation. "Don't come home." The words left my mouth like fire, scorching the air between us. Emily froze, eyes wide, mouth slightly open, as if she couldn't comprehend what she had just heard. Mark sat back, his smirk gone, replaced by a tense understanding of what had just occurred. The cafe seemed to vanish around us, the chatter, the clinking cups, everything muted except the weight of those 3 words. I didn't wait for explanations, for apologies, for excuses. I didn't care about rationalizations. In that moment, I had made my decision. If she still had a foot in the past, she didn't belong in my present. I turned and walked out, leaving them behind. Each step to the door felt like shedding a layer of disbelief, a layer of hope. The world outside had never felt so cold, yet so right. I had chosen myself first, finally. I stepped out of this cafe, the door closing behind me like a gavel sealing a verdict. The noise of the street hit me, but it felt muted, distant, as if the world itself had acknowledged the weight of what just happened. My chest still ached, tight with betrayal and heartbreak, yet a strange clarity cut through the haze. I didn't turn back. I didn't want to see Emily's expression, to hear Mark stumble for words. The silence I left behind was heavier than any argument, any confrontation I'd ever imagined. Each step I took toward my car felt like shedding an old skin, walking away from something I once thought unshakable. The wind brushed against my face, a cold reminder that life moved forward, whether I was ready or not. I slid into the driver's seat, hands gripping the wheel, and realized that for the first time, I was truly alone and resolute. I drove home in silence, the streets blurring past like a dream I didn't want to wake from. Every red light, every familiar corner seemed foreign, as if I was seeing the neighborhood for the first time. My hands gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, but my thoughts were empty. Nothing coherent could form. The image of Emily laughing with Mark replayed relentlessly, looping in my mind with unbearable clarity. I tried to remember the good moments, the first kiss, the engagement, the laughter in our new house, but even those memories felt tainted, fragile, like glass ready to shatter. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I wasn't sure if I was coming back to the home I'd known or stepping into a reality that had already split apart. I sat in the car a long moment, staring at the door, knowing I'd have to face her, but unsure if I even wanted the answers I was about to hear. She was waiting when I walked in, eyes wide, hands twisting nervously. As soon as she saw me, she launched into an explanation before I could speak. "Red, he was going through something and I was just trying to help," she said, voice shaky but firm. "It wasn't like I used to feel for him. It was nothing inappropriate, I promise." I listened, every word landing like stones in my chest. She painted the situation as noble, selfless, something I should be proud of. But the tighter she tried to convince me, the more I felt the truth slipping through her words. My chest burned with betrayal, and my mind couldn't untangle honesty from excuse. Finally, after she paused, I asked the only question that mattered. "Didn't you promise me you were done talking to him?" She hesitated, her silence louder than any denial. And in that pause, everything I feared became possible. I took a deep breath, fighting to keep my voice steady, and looked her in the eyes. "Emily, didn't you promise me you were done talking to him?" The words hung in the air, heavy and accusing, cutting through the tense silence between us. Her eyes darted away for a fraction of a second, and in that tiny hesitation I saw everything I feared. I could feel the weight of all those late nights, the creeping doubt, the sleepless hours pressing down on me. She opened her mouth, hesitated, then closed it again. The pause was deafening, louder than any argument I could have had. It wasn't a denial, not exactly. It was a silence that said more than words ever could. In that moment, I realized that her actions had already answered my question, whether she admitted it or not. The truth I didn't want to face was staring me straight in the eyes. Her silence hit me harder than any argument ever could. She didn't flinch, didn't try to defend herself. She just stared at me, eyes wide but empty, as if the weight of the truth had pinned her in place. That pause lasted only a few seconds, but in them, I saw it all. The calls, the texts, the laughter she thought I wouldn't notice. Everything she said before, every promise to cut him off, every, "You're the only one I want," it evaporated in the space between our gazes. My chest ached with a mixture of anger, betrayal, and heartbreak, but beneath it all, clarity emerged. I didn't need more words. Her silence confirmed what I already feared. She wasn't done. She wasn't over him. And in that moment, the choice became painfully simple. I could either keep investing in a future with someone whose heart wasn't fully mine, or I could walk away and reclaim myself. She fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face, voice breaking as she begged me not to end it. "Red, please. I didn't mean for any of this. I can explain. I'll fix it, I promise. Don't do this to us." Her hands reached out for me, trembling, desperate. I stared at her, my chest tight, jaw locked. I wanted to say something, anything, but my heart wouldn't allow it. I had waited, hoped, and trusted enough times. I had been patient. And now, silence became my shield, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. Each second of her pleading only reinforced my decision. I couldn't let love blind me to the truth. I stayed still, breathing steadily, letting her words crash over me like waves I could no longer ride. In the quiet, I knew what had to happen next, and she would finally understand the consequences of her actions. Tears streamed down her face, mascara streaking her cheeks as she reached out, voice shaking. "Red, I didn't mean to hurt you. Please, I can make this right. You're overreacting. You don't understand." She sobbed, clinging to me, trying to twist the blame, making me feel guilty for wanting honesty, for expecting loyalty. Her words tumbled over themselves, each one a desperate attempt to save what she knew she had already broken. I listened, my stomach in knots, my heart aching, but something inside me had snapped. I couldn't argue. I couldn't reason. I didn't need to. Her tears, her pleading, her accusations, they were powerless against the truth I had already seen. I breathed deeply, standing tall despite the storm of emotion in front of me. And in that moment, I realized there was only one way forward, one action that would make it clear. It was over, and it had to be final. I looked at her, taking a deep breath, voice calm but firm. "Emily, pack your things," I said. Not angry, not yelling, just stating a fact. The words hung in the air like a verdict. She blinked, stunned, tears streaming, lips trembling as if she wanted to argue, to plead, to rewrite what had already happened. But I didn't flinch. I had given her every chance, every ounce of trust, and it had been broken. I continued. "I can't fight for a place I'm supposed to already have. This ends now." Her shoulders slumped, as if the weight of the world had finally landed. Slowly, shakily, she began gathering her things, stuffing clothes and personal items into a bag, avoiding eye contact. Each item she packed felt like a small confirmation of the reality I had been trying to accept. The chapter was over, and nothing could change that. I stood there quietly, letting her actions speak for the end we both needed to face. As she shuffled through the last of her things, I could see it in her eyes. She still didn't fully understand. She looked at me with that mix of hope and fear, thinking I might change my mind, that this was just a moment of anger, a flare-up we could laugh about tomorrow. "Red, it's just a fight, right? You'll calm down and we'll be okay," she whispered, voice trembling. But I knew better. This wasn't anger. It was clarity, a boundary I refused to compromise. I shook my head slowly, letting the silence speak louder than any words. She stopped for a moment, confusion and panic crossing her face, but then began packing again, slower now, realizing that whatever she had hoped for wasn't coming. And in that quiet understanding, I felt the weight of finality settle over both of us. The mistake wasn't in her leaving. It was in thinking I would let her stay while her heart still wandered. I didn't wait for her to finish. While she gathered the last of her essentials, I moved quietly through the house, packing the rest. Every item, shoes, books, dishes, little things she had left scattered around, went into boxes or bags, ready for her to take. I didn't touch her personal memories. They weren't mine to erase. But I made sure there was no room left for ambiguity, no space for her to hope that I might change my mind. The act felt mechanical, but inside, my heart pounded. Each item I packed was a step toward closure, a step away from the pain she had brought back into our life. I didn't speak. I didn't argue. The only sound was the rustle of packing paper and the occasional clink of a dish. And as I stacked the last box by the door, I knew with certainty this chapter was over, and there was no going back. Within hours, my phone buzzed relentlessly. One message after another, Emily's frustration, sorrow, and anger poured out in words. "You're so controlling," one read. "You can't handle a strong woman," another. Then the final jab. "He's better than you ever were." I stared at the screen, each notification a needle pricking deeper into the wound of our relationship. My fingers itched to reply, to defend myself, to explain why I had done what was necessary, but I knew better. Every message she sent was a reflection of her own choices, her own inability to honor the promises she had made. I let them sit, unread for a moment, feeling the tension pulse through my chest. Anger, hurt, betrayal. They swirled inside me, a storm that threatened to spill. But amidst it all, I realized that no reply, no argument, could fix what had already been broken. This was her storm, not mine to weather anymore. Finally, I typed a single response and hit send. "Go be with him." Just 4 words, nothing more. I didn't elaborate, I didn't argue, I didn't defend myself. I didn't want to waste another second pleading with someone who had already chosen another path. Immediately, a strange calm settled over me, like exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding for years. The phone fell silent after that. No more messages, no more notifications, no more attempts to pull me back into a story that wasn't mine to fix. And for the first time since that cafe, I felt a weight lift from my chest. The anger, the betrayal, the sleepless nights. They were still there, yes, but finally contained. I had made my choice, and now it was hers. I had said my piece. Nothing else mattered. She would follow her heart, and I would finally reclaim mine. Days turned into weeks, and the silence that followed felt both heavy and strangely liberating. I couldn't pretend the sadness wasn't there. I had loved Emily deeply, imagined a future with her in that little suburban house, planned for anniversaries, holidays, even quiet Sunday mornings together. Letting that go left a hollow ache in my chest. But alongside the grief came relief. Relief that I no longer had to wonder where her heart truly lay. Relief that I could finally breathe without the constant weight of suspicion. Relief that I had chosen myself first. I spent hours reflecting, thinking not just about Emily, but about the choices I had made, the boundaries I'd set, the moments I'd trusted my instincts. Pain and clarity, sorrow and liberation. They coexisted, strange bedfellows, teaching me that ending something broken doesn't diminish what it once meant. Sometimes walking away is the only way to find peace. Weeks later, I thought the silence was permanent. Then my phone buzzed. Not Emily this time, but Mark. He sent me a voicemail, his voice smug, taunting. "She'll always come back to me, Red. She's mine. You were just a chapter she used to heal." At first, anger boiled in me. But then I caught something strange. A date he mentioned. A story he claimed about him and Emily. And I knew it was impossible. He wasn't just stealing her, he was rewriting her. Lying. Manipulating. In that moment, it hit me. Emily betrayed me, yes. But Mark? He was poison, the kind that infects everything it touches. And that's when I realized the truth. I wasn't losing a wife. I was escaping 2 prisons at once. The pain was real, but so was the freedom. And that freedom was worth everything.